So, responding to videos that are hilariously long is quite the challenge. I mean, whenever I respond to a video, it's long unto itself, and sometimes it's just like a 30-second clip. Sometimes it's a 1-minute clip, and the video can span off to be like 20 minutes long. But as a good old friend of mine named Goodfellow once said, it takes all of 30 seconds to spray a whole bunch of crap on the wall, but it can take hours to clean it up. Probably should have done that in his accent now, shouldn't I? I have a very tough time mocking his accent. I'm not going to try and do it today. So, I was watching this video called The Menzies Are Alone, But Should We Care? And from that title alone, I recognize that we're not really going to get a strong empathetic take on how male loneliness is on the rise. In fact, the article itself that I have mentioned before on my channel does not have a very empathetic take on young men. It, as all of society does, puts the burden on men for being alone, that they're not up to snuff to women's standards, that they're not doing the emotional work that they need to do in order to be selected by women. Now, to be fair, there might be a little bit of truth in that. Truth so far as in, they don't really have the opportunities to have experiences with women to be able to develop those skills from start to finish, because they're lonely. But this video goes on to really rub that point home deep. It's interesting because the presenter here does this thing where she approaches a point where she's trying to say that maybe we should kind of care, only to then snap back and remember that men are her antagonists, men are her foes, her adversaries at the very least. If not men as individual people, men as a concept have some issue or deep-seated problem, and dare I would say misogyny against women, that has to be overcame, which is the inherent flaw and weakness of feminist theory from start to finish. Men and women are not antagonistic competing forces against each other as a class or in principle. At best, it should be evil men do bad things to good people or good men. That it's virtue versus vice, not genitalia versus genitalia. Considering one of the biggest ironies here, or ironies is actually the word, I don't know why the flip I said that. Considering one of the biggest ironies here is that genitalia work in unison, they do not work against one another. So just in the nature of man being human, men and women are not antagonistic forces at all, but they are complementary forces that must work together to continue to make more people. From that point alone, your literal existence is the proof of concept that man and woman work as a unit together, not as pieces apart. Of course, when you factor in the sexual revolution completely destroying the purpose of sex, I say completely only so far as most people believe that you can have a disconnection between the two, as if, operating a motor vehicle somehow disconnects you from driving somehow. Make that make sense. The long and short of it is, men and women have questioned why they should even interact with one another. And of course, feminist theory just doesn't help with that at all. This video is actually a really good example of that. This video is about how young men are experiencing loneliness. And for some odd reason, whenever young ladies are broached with this topic, the first reaction they have is that men are not owed our company, time, and most importantly, our sex. So if they're lonely, they need to do something to, I guess, address that they have to do something. But of course, it ignores a very, well, dare I would say, obvious problem. Something that I find interesting that very few people point this out. But that is, if all of these men are lonely, and ironically there's a little less men than there are women, especially when you get later into life, where are all the women? The reality is, there's a magnifying glass on male loneliness because people view lonely males as dangerous, and in all honesty, they kind of are. They are time bombs that are being created and crafted over a long period of time of stress, tension, and antagonism that honestly probably does need to be curtailed. But rather than actually solving this with love, empathy, and consideration, the very things that they need in order to abate their disdain from start to finish, they are instead met with criticism, derision, and fear. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that's going to make men that have a predilection of violence less violent. Just from kind of start to finish. People love to put the cart before the horse. I see this a lot of the time when these young men are lonely and sad, that people always put the onus on them, and that being lonely and sad is unattractive, as if they came out of the womb mad at the fact that they have to exist on this little wet rock that hurls through literal nothingness. And that it wasn't a predilection, it wasn't a state of mind that was developed over time through a bunch of rejections, failures, perhaps bullying, sometimes the fact that they just didn't have a father in their life, the advent of a huge amount of pornography that teases them with what they want, but never actually having the avenue to truly obtain it. I find it interesting that we just jump over all of that and get to, well, do something, young man. Years and years of this, you've been dealing with these feelings, but, it's your fault. Do something about it. It's unreasonable. At least to me, it's a bit unreasonable to tell someone who's drowning to just stop getting water in their lungs. If someone's drowning, you either have to tell them to sink or swim. And unfortunately, in this analogy, letting people sink just makes them depressed, angry individuals that apparently are more prone to, hurt other individuals. Which again, for me, I would imagine that if the ultimate goal was to stop these crazy violent men from being crazy and violent and hurting people, you would want to actually address their problem and try to help them get over it. Not tell them that it's their fault and they need to get over their problem. So, looking at certain parts of this video, we can find the inklings of this antagonistic relationship between men and women just throughout it. For example, let's start with this point here.
Include myself in that. That was the kind I was learning at the time. And being encouraged to lean in and stuff. It just seemed like, yes, women really can, quote, have it all. A lot of women started realizing, I think, in this time period especially, and not that this is the first time it's ever happened, but in the next wave, this was a time when we started realizing, oh, what do I really need a guy for besides if I like to have sex? Or something along those lines. And it's not to say that the dudes didn't deserve the kind of energy we were bringing, because I'm gonna get to it. Because I've been real nice to y'all. I've seen the numbers increase. I've been nice to y'all, okay? As I mentioned from the Pew Research, they were pointing out how men that are unpartnered, there's just diminishing of your quality of life, I guess, overall. And for women, it seems to be the opposite. In contrast, women benefit far more from being alone. According to Professor Paul Dolan, a happiness expert and professor of behavioral science at the London School of Economics, the quote, healthiest and happiest population subgroup are women who never married or had children. What also comes into this girl bossing and just being in charge of our own destinies and all the independence. I mean, let's also think about it. A lot of us have had this independence for a while, not because it was yeah, you're a woman, but it was you need to just figure it out because we have to coddle the boys and then throw them to the side once they get old enough, and you got to take care of everything and take care of them once we ruin them. So sort it out, scoot. And you have a job. Some of us were already working with that independence, so I think that's also... But anyway, lots more of us. We're finding that independence and this sort of sexual liberation. There are all these dating apps coming out as well, and with dating apps, it's just numbers and screens, just tons and tons and tons of people. It's kind of like a little cyber dating buffet. You just click through left, right. People almost stop being people and are just the pictures and the brief bit that you might gather from them. Because of all of these options, and because, women started realizing, I don't need this. I don't need any of this. And some of us started even realizing, I don't even need to be a woman. What? sorry, our quote standards increased. And I wouldn't necessarily even say that they increased. I would just say that more of us felt comfortable to voice them, not only to ourselves and to our friends, but online and to each other. Like, the bar is in hell. You say that to another girl and they just know. Or you say that, I shouldn't say another girl, but you know what I mean. Like, you say that and they know. They just know. To the point where you hear variations. Or if y'all remember, the men are trash. God, we're ruthless.
Now, of course, she's right, but when you start sprinkling in the nuances of reality, certain questions start getting asked. For one, if young women have indeed started raising their standards to such an extent, why do they still find themselves miserable and lonely themselves and have a great amount of disdain for the men that they've been with? I mean, with such increased standards, you would imagine that they would all be really happy, and they most definitely wouldn't be on TikTok complaining, and they most definitely wouldn't be complaining about how online dating apps don't work, and they most definitely wouldn't be talking about how they're so sick and tired of men, now would they? I mean, their standards have increased, certainly, so wouldn't the quality of men they'd be dealing with also have increased as well, just by nature of what their standards increasing meant? So something doesn't really seem to be adding up. I mean, this sounds really good on paper, right? I have increased my standards and thus the quality of my relationships will increase. But of course, men and women don't exist in a vacuum. For as much as you increase your standards, you have to recognize that if there aren't men available in order to meet those increased standards, then you haven't solved anything. You haven't solved any of your problems that originally existed from start to finish. Because the problems that existed from start to finish was not that your standards were just so low, but that you didn't have values of which needed to be sadists or satisfied from start to finish. The values, that is, this person has strong moral character, that this person actually cares about you as a human being. There's a whole bunch of different arbitrary standards that you use to discount men because you feel like you've got so many options, as was presented before. But none of those standards exist to actually sort out character. And you'll notice that there is little of ever any mention of that. Women have okay, fine, not all of them, but a lot of them have like a downright refusal to sit down and accept that character, virtue, honor, integrity are far more important than all the other nonsense that they're asking or putting on their list to begin with. And in the end, it leaves them just as lonely as a lot of the men are lonely as well. The irony being is that they feel self-righteous about the fact that they're lonely because they've leveled up in the world and they're doing better. But see, this is something that's so odd and befuddling to me. What's befuddling to me is the fact that in the pursuit of trying to emulate young men, they forgot one of the most important aspects that came with man. And this is critical here and to my point in how antagonistic the relationship between men and women is, or at least through a feminist theory. And that is, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that is something that is wholly ignored by feminists in its nature, because they pretend that men who have all of this power don't have responsibility to use it wisely, and that the only thing that they've ever done with their power is just hurt and oppress women in somehow, even though they're in a really safe, comfortable environment that gives them more opportunities and scholarships and more social consideration as well, somehow. See, the problem is, the moment you start thinking critically about this stuff, it just doesn't make any sense. It might be true that women have increased their standards, but the metrics of which they've increased their standards have been mostly service level, mostly looks, status, validation seeking. But they didn't increase their standards in terms of honor, compassion, and being a good person. And more than that, they don't take the fact that they have their power and use it wisely or intelligently, or use their power as if there's some responsibility that comes with it, something that is just wholly ignored in femininity from start to finish. Sorry to say, but, well, it is. This entire video that this young lady made is the case in point in that. She goes on to continuously talk about the fact that women have done some type of emotional labor for men. Lamented here.
Men vibe with men, but even tolerate them at times. Like, that's wild to think about. There's a portion of the population that people are like, oh, men, y'all. A lot of us have had to settle for the bare minimum when it comes to the men in our lives, have had to make excuses for them, have had to do all manner of emotional labor?
Now, the thing that I find greatly befuddling about this point is the fact that I've never in my life ever experienced women's emotional labor. I guess the closest I've gotten, or I think the best example would be from my mother, but I don't think that this is the nature of which she was referring to. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. The emotional labor that mothers have for their children. But as far as women outside of my family, actually, even the women within my family, talking about my sisters, I mean, even then, there have been times where I've tried desperately to reconnect with my older sister, and she just had no consideration nor care to even attempt to mend that bridge. The thing that I find interesting is the fact that most of my relationships with women have not been relationships where that woman cares about me. There's been a relationship where I care about them, and that all of my emotional energy and labor, I guess you could say, and time and consideration and knowledge and wisdom is being funneled into helping them. But nay, do they ever try to help me. And the thing that I find interesting about this is I don't even ask for them to be like that. I don't really go into these relationships believing that they owe me anything, as so many women love to say, that we men are so entitled. But the long and short of it is, unless I'm just so wholly different and unique, most of my relationships with women, I'm just going to be honest, are burdensome. Whether it's me paying more money than, they just don't invest any money in me at all. But even though, just from an emotion, from just financial, money is just leaving. It's not returning. No investment being returned there. Point of fact one. Even to the amount of emotional consideration I would give them. Me thinking about their problems, me trying to find solutions for them, me just listening to them vent and complain is just heavy for me as well. Most people don't consider the burden of powerlessness you can feel when someone has a problem and you just can't do anything about it. You just can't help them. Many a therapist have dealt with this problem. Many therapists have need therapy for themselves after being in this job. Many teachers, this is actually when I learned this, when I became a substitute teacher and seeing all the different problems these students are having and having them vent to me only to find that there's just nothing I can do. Is heavy. Most women don't even consider that. They don't even think about that. I say women, but honestly, it's kind of people in general. It's just in this particular circumstance, we find and we respect somehow all of the emotional labor that women are doing, and I've never experienced it. I have, on the other hand, always experienced women venting to me. I have always been more or less their psychiatrist or their therapist. I've always been a dude there that would help them out, a man that would protect them, even when they were being stupid themselves. I've always done this. Women have always been more of a burden to me than they have ever been an asset, by a mile. But despite the fact that that's true, I still love them. I still love women. I still like them. I talk about them all the time. Not because I hate them, but because I like them. Women are my favorite thing to talk about. Despite the fact that women have always been more burdensome to me than they've ever been an asset, I still love and care about them. Mostly because love is mostly, at least to me, a measure of selflessness in what you can provide and what you can do to help people. It isn't something that's selfish and concerned with what they get from the other person. So I really don't need to get anything from these women. But the long and short of it is, and this is more the major point that I'm making than not, and that major point is, whatever men she's referring to, I am just not that man. There seems to be some type of disconnect here. Some type of mismatching going on. It's something that I had recognized long ago when I was a young person. And that is the fact that women wholly, and I've mentioned this on many a video, seem to only ever tunnel vision on a select group of men with this one idea of some dude that hurt them. And then they take that and they splash it out onto everyone. And that's just unreasonable. That's not true, and that's not a good way to view the world, because again, it's in this mismatched wrong framework of some antagonism that men are some type of evil, that men as a class, as a concept, are doing to women as a class or a concept. And that just isn't reality. That's just not how the world works. It's just, I don't even think I really need to provide the supporting data that men as people aren't enemies to women as people. especially when men try to do so much to gain the favor of women and try to make their lives better and easier. You can't have overwhelmingly more men trying to help women and then come to the conclusion that all men generally dislike women because a subsect of men that have a lot of female attention have grown to resent them because they were all crappy partners in one way or another. Replay that last section and think hard about what I just said, okay? The point that I'm making is this. You can't move forward in these conversations with feminist ideology, and you can't move forward in these conversations by always putting the blame on men and always telling young men that they have to do more, they have to do something better, and that they deserve it. Looking at that comment section is just dreadful. There's all these women who seem to have not really even grasped the ultimate conclusion that even the presenter herself was making, and that is to have some empathy. I know it sounds funny that I was talking about the fact that that wasn't the case just based on the few excerpts I've had, but if you actually make it to the end of her 40-minute long video, she is saying that you're supposed to at least try to talk to these people.
Yourself to be. How do you choose to express yourself? Let's talk. You know, it's not that. It's not that for the boys. While I completely understand that there needed to be a time for anger, there needed to be a men are trash time, there needed to be all of us online just dragging y'all for filth. There needed to be a time because, I don't know, to me, it almost felt kind of cathartic, and it was also finding camaraderie, all of that. But there also then needed to be a time of looking at that and going, okay, we've said it, maybe took it a little too far, and we have this rise that we see of this manosphere, incels, all this sort of stuff, retaliating against this independence, you know, because you see the pendulums. That's an extreme reaction. But what can we learn from that? And what I think we can learn from that is that it's a lot deeper than just thinking men are trash. How single, lonely men are on the rise, how that's not something a lot of us, I think, want. And by lonely, I mean, even if the boys need more friends or more community, you know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily that we need people to date these boys. Okay. I'm not saying that. I don't know who's saying that, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying we just need we need these boys to have more community. Honest truth.
But if you go and you look at that comment section, those women are not too privy to actually trying to expand their reaches and really have good, authentic conversations with men and figure out their problems and why they feel the way they feel. In conclusion, what I'm saying is this. We have to let go. We have to be leaders, and we have to be wise, and to stop looking at the opposite sex or the opposite to us as our enemy. If anything, they're a victim that needs to be helped. If a woman walks around with the belief that men are her enemy, something bad probably happened to her. And by that extension, if a man walks around and thinks that women are the enemy, something bad probably happened to him. I'm not saying that everyone is fully equipped to be a therapist and everyone is fully equipped to deal with the trauma of other people. No, they're not. They're just not. But having hatred, derision, and discounting and just a lack of empathy for these people are never going to make anything better. It's just not. It's not going to solve any problem. And if anything, it's just going to make things worse because these people are going to feel more marginalized. They're going to feel more disrespected. They're going to feel more angry. And it's just going to push them further down a pipeline. That will get them where? Well, I'm certain you guys can guess. At least guess what the mainstream media would probably want you to believe. What would probably more accurately happen is that these young men would hurt themselves first before they hurt other people. And even then, it's just, the end is just pain and misery. I'm not saying that you guys have to be superheroes and super paladins of virtue throughout the world. But what I am saying is at the very least, for this video, you have to drop this idea that men are an antagonistic force to women and that women are an antagonistic force to men. We're just not. So with that being said, I certainly hope you guys got something out of today's video. I doubt it, but if you did, you know, go ahead and click the like button. Yeah, shoot. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.